cologne. Penny sat frozen in the passenger seat, drowning in the massive wool coat he had draped over her. The rain pounded against the tinted glass, but inside the cabin it was terrifyingly quiet. Behind them, the convoy of G-wagons and the Ferrari fell into perfect formation, escorting them through the slick, empty streets of Chicago. "Taylor Street," Penny whispered, her voice barely audible over the purr of the engine. "Near the old bakery. It's a brick walk-up." Lorenzo didn't look at the GPS. He simply nodded his large, scarred hands, maneuvering the steering wheel with casual, terrifying grace. "My brother Dante. He is 22. He was supposed to be touring real estate properties tonight. Instead, a rival syndicate ambushed him. 3 of my men died protecting him." Penny swallowed hard, staring at the side of Lorenzo's sharp profile. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," Lorenzo said, his voice a low, lethal hum. "The men who did it are already dead. Marco handled it while I drove to the hospital." Penny shivered, though the car was warm. She was sitting next to a man who ordered executions as easily as she ordered a coffee. Yet when Lorenzo pulled the SUV up to the curb of her dilapidated apartment building in Little Italy, he didn't look at her crumbling stoop with disgust. He looked at it with quiet calculation. "You live here," he stated, cutting the engine. "I know it's not a Gold Coast penthouse," Penny said defensively, her insecurities flaring up. She pulled the coat tighter around her plump frame. "But it's what a nurse's salary affords when she has to pay $5,000 a month out of pocket for her mother's insulin and dialysis." Lorenzo turned his head slowly. His piercing grey eyes locked onto hers, and for a second, the dangerous Mafia Don vanished, replaced by a man deeply moved. "Your mother is sick." "Evelyn," Penny said, looking down at her hands. "She's all I have. I was working double shifts to keep her treatments going. Without my job, without my license." Her voice cracked, the terrifying reality of her situation finally breaking through her adrenaline. Before she could stop them, hot tears spilled over her cheeks. She was 32, overweight, exhausted, and completely broken. Lorenzo moved so fast she flinched, but his touch was remarkably gentle. He reached across the console, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. His hand lingered, his fingers tracing the soft curve of her jawline. "Look at me, Penelope," he commanded softly. She forced her eyes up to meet his. "Society tells women that to be valued they must be thin, compliant, and invisible." Lorenzo said, his voice vibrating with a dark, simmering intensity. "I do not care about society. I look at you, and I see a woman with hands steady enough to cheat death. I see a woman soft enough to comfort the dying and fierce enough to tell a mafia boss she has a name. You are magnificent." Penny's breath hitched. No man, let alone a man who looked like he had stepped off the cover of GQ, had ever spoken to her like that. He wasn't looking past her size. He was looking directly at it, and he was captivated. A sharp knock on the driver's side window broke the spell. It was Marco. Lorenzo rolled the window down a fraction. "Speak." "Boss," Marco said, water dripping from his scarred chin. "The hospital buyout is in motion. We set up the shell company, Vanguard Health Holdings. We've aggressively purchased the majority shares from the board. As of 8 a.m. tomorrow, you own Chicago General." "And the administrator?" Lorenzo asked, his eyes never leaving Penny's face. "Victoria Hastings is currently asleep in her condo on Lakeshore Drive. She has no idea." "Good," Lorenzo said. He rolled the window up and turned completely to Penny. "Go upstairs. Pack a bag for you, and a bag for your mother, Evelyn. You are no longer living in this building." "Mr. Rossi, I can't—" "Lorenzo," he corrected smoothly. "And you can. I am moving you and your mother into my private estate in Highland Park. My personal medical staff will take over her dialysis. You will never pay for another vial of insulin as long as you live." "Why are you doing this?" Penny asked, her voice trembling. "I just saved a patient. It's what I took an oath to do." "And I took an oath to protect my family," Lorenzo replied, leaning in until his lips were inches from hers. "You are the reason my brother is breathing. That makes you family now. And Rossi men take care of their own." 2 days later, the boardroom of Chicago General Hospital was a suffocating chamber of panic. Victoria Hastings, impeccably dressed as always, in a stark white Chanel suit, paced nervously at the head of the long mahogany table. Dr. Richard Allman sat nearby, wiping sweat from his forehead. The sudden hostile takeover by Vanguard Health Holdings had blindsided the entire executive board. They had been summoned for an emergency meeting with the new majority shareholder, and no one knew who it was. "We just need to explain our margins," Victoria said, her voice tight. "We tell them about our cost-cutting measures, the recent staff terminations to balance the budget." The heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open. Silence fell over the room like a guillotine. 4 men in tailored black suits walked in, first fanning out to secure the corners of the room. Marco, his scarred face stoic, stood by the door. Then Lorenzo Rossi entered. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that screamed lethal elegance. But it wasn't the notorious crime boss that made Victoria Hastings gasp and drop her pen. It was the woman holding his arm. Penelope Gallagher walked into the boardroom, completely transformed. She wasn't wearing shapeless, fluid-stained scrubs. She was wearing a custom-tailored, deep emerald green wrap dress that hugged her heavy curves in all the right places, accentuating her full bust and cinching at her waist. Her hair was styled in soft, cascading waves, and her makeup was flawless. She looked powerful, beautiful, and absolutely terrifying. "Penelope." Dr. Allman choked out his face, turning the color of ash. What is the meaning of this?" Lorenzo pulled out a leather chair at the head of the table. He didn't sit in it. He guided Penny into it, standing behind her, like a dark, immovable guardian. "Good morning, Victoria. Richard." Penny said, her voice steady and smooth. She folded her hands on the polished wood. "I believe we have some hospital business to discuss." Victoria's perfectly manicured hands shook as she gripped the edge of the table. She looked from Penny to Lorenzo, finally recognizing the terrifying man from the emergency room, whispers. You can't be Vanguard Health Holdings. You're a mobster." "I am an investor," Lorenzo corrected coldly. "And as of 48 hours ago, I own 82% of this hospital's voting shares, which means I own this building, I own the equipment, and I own your contracts." He leaned forward, placing his large hands on the back of Penny's chair. 2 days ago, you fired the finest medical professional in this facility." Lorenzo continued, his voice echoing in the silent room. "You prioritized your pathetic public image over a human life. You insulted her. You stripped her of her dignity." "She broke protocol," Dr. Allman shouted defensively. "She operated outside her scope." Lorenzo didn't even look at the doctor. He snapped his fingers. Marco stepped forward, tossing a thick manila folder onto the table. It slid to a stop right in front of Victoria. "My associates did a little digging into your prestigious image," Lorenzo said smoothly. "That folder contains bank records tracing $2.4 million diverted from the Pediatric Oncology Fund into a private offshore account under your maiden name, Victoria. And Dr. Almanit details the kickbacks you've been receiving from pharmaceutical reps to push addictive opioids through the ER." Victoria's face drained of all blood. She collapsed into her chair, realizing she was entirely destroyed. "You're going to kill us," Dr. Allman whimpered, trembling violently. "I am a businessman, Richard, not a monster," Lorenzo sneered. "I don't need to kill you." Right on cue, the boardroom doors opened again. 2 Chicago police detectives walked in, looking incredibly uncomfortable but determined. Lorenzo had handed them the financial evidence on a silver platter. It was a career-making bust they couldn't ignore, even if it came from the Rossi syndicate. Victoria Hastings and Dr. Richard Allman, the lead detective, said, pulling out his handcuffs, "You're under arrest for embezzlement fraud and medical malpractice." Penny sat silently as she watched the 2 people who had made her life a living hell be read their rights and escorted out of the room in handcuffs. The sheer overwhelming satisfaction of the moment left her breathless. When the doors closed, leaving only Penny Lorenzo and his men in the room, Lorenzo looked down at her. "The hospital needs a new chief administrator," Lorenzo said softly. "Someone who actually cares about the patients. Someone who knows what it's like to work the floor. I was thinking of appointing a woman named Penelope Gallagher." Penny looked up at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Lorenzo, I'm just a nurse. I don't know how to run a hospital." "You know how to save lives," Lorenzo corrected, coming around the side of the chair and kneeling beside her, uncaring of his expensive suit. He took her hands in his. "I will hire the accountants. I will hire the lawyers. You will run the medicine. You will build the hospital you always wanted to work in." "This is madness," she whispered, tears of joy welling in her eyes. "Why are you doing all of this for me? Look at me. I'm not a Mafia queen. I'm just a fat girl from Little Italy." "Stop," Lorenzo ordered, his voice thick with raw emotion. He reached up, cupping her face. "You are exactly what I want. Your curves, your softness, your fire. You are the most beautiful creature I have ever laid eyes on. I don't want a fragile porcelain doll. I want a queen who can hold a man's heart in her hands and keep it beating." He didn't wait for her to argue. Lorenzo pulled her down by the lapels of her dress and crashed his lips against hers. The kiss was consuming, tasting of raw power, dark promises, and an undeniable burning passion. Penny melted into him, her hands tangling in his dark hair, finally letting go of the lifetime of insecurities that had weighed her down. She wasn't just a discarded employee anymore. She was the savior of the Rossi family, the new ruler of Chicago General, and the sole obsession of the city's most dangerous man. As Lorenzo pulled back, resting his forehead against hers, he smiled a rare, devastating expression. "Come mia regina," he murmured, helping her to her feet. "Your mother is waiting for us at the estate, and we have an empire to run." Penny went from a discarded, humiliated nurse to the most powerful woman in Chicago's medical scene, all because she had the courage to do the right thing. Lorenzo proved that real men don't care about a number on a scale. They care about the size of a woman's heart and her unyielding bravery. Do you think Penny made the right choice, embracing her dark Mafia king? Let us know in the comments. Like this video, share it with someone who loves a badass revenge story, and subscribe for more thrilling real-life drama.